All right, let's make a start. We've got a relatively large amount to cover. So hi everybody, thanks for joining the session today. My name is Charles Feddersen. I lead the product management team for Postgres at Microsoft, and I'm joined by Mohsin, who will come on stage shortly from Nasdaq to talk about how they've built their Board Vantage solution on a variety of Azure services. So I'm just going to kick us off here. It's a relatively short agenda, then Mohsin's going to expand upon that in a little bit more depth when he gets here. But the basic content of the session today is going to cover everything that you can fundamentally see on the screen here. So Nasdaq are deploying these solutions using two of our open source databases in Azure today, Postgres and MySQL, but then complementing that with a number of other key services, most notably Foundry, where they're leveraging their AI models. And Mohsin's going to walk you through how they're using AI in the Board Vantage solution for doing a lot of work on documents and text to bring a lot of efficiencies and optimization. He'll talk about the models, talk about document intelligence and how they implemented that over a previous way they were doing things to find a lot of efficiencies and improvements in quality as well. He'll talk a little bit about API management and then Kubernetes, which is the underlying application infrastructure for all of it. Before he gets into that, however, I just want to give a few minutes here to talk about what we've done specifically in Postgres at Microsoft over the last couple of years. Many people are often unaware, actually, that Microsoft is one of the largest committers to the open source Postgres project. And Postgres has found itself in this position, particularly over the last couple of years. And I think, by virtue of the fact that when the ChatGPT tidal wave broke, Postgres was one of the only databases that had a native vector index directly within the database at that time. And if you take a look at the popularity of PG Vector, it basically hockey sticked upwards from that point in time, February about 2023. It was already had strong developer preference, and we've seen that continue to grow. But amongst the hyperscalers, Microsoft has been the largest committer over the last 3 years. And it's part of really how we approach working in the Postgres ecosystem. We build and ship Postgres services. We ship Azure Database for Postgres, and we've announced HorizonDB at Ignite as well. But part of being a responsible member of that community is taking what we learn from open source software, running it at scale in the cloud, and committing it back upstream into the core open source project. And that is exactly what we do. It is a virtuous loop that just continues around. It makes Postgres better for everybody, and it's how we participate in that community. Now at Ignite, we've had a couple of announcements specific to Flexible Server. I'm not going to drain the entire list here, but two things that I really want to call out is how we've lit up the latest generation of SKUs directly into the Flexible Server service. We've basically doubled the maximum number of vCores that are available for you. We've made improvements to our storage as well, which are not mentioned here as well, but that's enabling high availability on a more performant version of SSD. The other one that I just want to talk about is in the lower left-hand corner here, the Postgres extension for VS Code. So we announced this actually at PyCon just before Build, and then re-announced it at Build earlier this year. I think we're close to about 280,000 installations right now. We've seen a ton of positive feedback, a lot of interaction with that community who have asked us to fix little things. We've been able to turn fixes incredibly quickly, and we're seeing really strong adoption. And our vision with this extension in Postgres is to offer effectively the full life cycle from provisioning to managing to developing, leveraging Copilot for more productive development, and then also debugging, monitoring, and then migration as well. And you've seen a lot more of that come to light at Ignite this year in other sessions. But if you do use VS Code and you're interested, go take a look for the VS Code extension from Microsoft. It's got about, as I said, 280,000 installations today, and you should be able to spot that one. Now, the big announcement that we made Ignite this year was around HorizonDB. HorizonDB is our new cloud-native Postgres service where we've basically built a new storage capability that is zonal resilient by default. There was a great session given earlier this morning by Denzel and Adam that went into a lot of depth on how this works technically. But basically, it's designed to deliver much higher transactional performance throughput, much higher vector search performance with a full zonal resiliency configuration so that you can run these mission-critical workloads with the highest levels of availability, and then very simple failovers that sort of make it a little bit more, improve the availability, reduce the downtime relative to perhaps self-managed Postgres as well. So this is in private preview right now. There is a sign-up form that you can get started on. I think we've got a slide for that towards the end of the session. But really what I want to do is hand it over to Mohsin. So before he comes up here, we've got a short video we're going to play, and then we're going to give it to Mohsin for the rest of the session just to walk you through how they built Board Vantage on all of this Azure technology. So thank you. Where's my video? Better hit play.
This milestone marks the culmination of our Future of the Boardroom Forum, which is a celebration of bold ideas, transformative technologies, and strategic partnerships that are shaping the future of governance.
It's been such a thrill to be building AI-driven products with NASDAQ. AI changes the way we work, it changes the way we live, and now it's reimagining the way that we can make the most important decisions at the highest level.
We are reimagining how boards operate, empowering boards to lead with clarity and confidence in a world that demands agility, insight, and precision.
Thank you very much, Charles. It is really fantastic to be here. Hello, everyone. My name is Mohsin. I am a Senior Manager of Engineering at NASDAQ, and I work with the NASDAQ Boardvantage platform. I'm here today to talk about our AI-driven governance on Azure Foundry and PostgreSQL. But before we go there, I'd like to walk you through the agenda so you kind of know what you're in for. The picture Microsoft has used here is from a few years ago. A lot of things have changed since then. One thing that has really changed is how we do governance in 2025. That's exactly what we're going to be talking about. We will talk about NASDAQ's cloud journey and some of the challenges that we've had with that and how Azure helped us to solve those challenges. We will then talk about enabling AI on our platforms. And some of the features that we've put into the hands of our customers over the last 2 to 3 years. We will be doing a technical deep dive, and I'll be demoing a couple of features for you guys. Now, as a tech guy, I know sometimes in events like these, the demo gods are not very kind to us. So in case something goes wrong, fret not, we have backup videos, so we'll be switching to them, but hopefully everything should be fine. And then we'll be doing some architectural deep dive to explain some of the architectural decisions we made, and then eventually, if there's any learnings and evolution on our platforms, we'll be talking about that as well. So why does governance matter? In 2025, governance is no longer about oversight. It's actually about foresight, because we are living in a technical revolution that's being driven by AI. The decisions need to be made really fast because stakes are really, really high. Governance is what is keeping leadership aligned, agile, and accountable. And now at NASDAQ, we want to solve a problem. That problem is where traditional ways of working are becoming less and less relevant, where decisions have to be faster, smarter, and be made with greater transparency. This is where NASDAQ Board Vantage steps in and really shines with our AI-driven workflows like smart document summarization, AI-generated meeting minutes, contextual insights into your upcoming meetings. We are transforming governance from a manual reactive process to a proactive strategic advantage. Now, I'm happy to say that since we've released our AI features to production, our customers report more than 25% of time savings annually. That is more than 100 plus hours saved on manual workflows like executive summaries of board documents and manually creating meeting minutes. So that's 100 plus hours saved. It's fantastic savings for our customers. However, it started with something slightly different. It started with our move to the cloud. Now, I know this session is mainly about our AI Foundry and PostgreSQL and our AI workloads, but I think it's really important to understand how we did what we did and the role that our partnership with Microsoft, and particularly Microsoft Azure, played in driving our innovation forward. Today, NASDAQ Board Vantage serves more than 4,500 companies worldwide. We are serving almost half of Fortune 500 organizations. It is really important for us to speak the same language that our customers do, as most of our customers are already in the cloud or are on their way there. As I'm sure is the case with all the organizations represented in this room, you are in some way, shape, or form towards your journey in the cloud. So when we are onboarding our customers, Azure really simplifies that onboarding process because we can speak the same language when it comes to cloud standards such as data privacy, security, cross-region deployments, and everything that comes with being on the cloud. Now, NASDAQ is also like I mentioned, a global platform, which means we operate in different parts of the world. And that, while amazing, means that we have to comply with regulations pertaining to data residency and data processing in different parts of the world. When we were in the data center, we were managing this by having data centers in different regions. So being on Azure meant that had to meet that requirement as well. And now you might be thinking, what is this guy talking about? Of course, being on the cloud means that we will be meeting all these requirements. But let me explain. NASDAQ Board Vantage today is made up of many moving parts, from Azure Kubernetes Services to multiple databases to blob storages in Azure Key Vaults, and now with Azure AI Foundry, where we are deploying different models. All of these components have to follow that exact same standard when it comes to regional data residency and processing. So for example, if I'm going to deploy a 4.1 mini model in Australia East, it has to be processing its data in Australia East for that customer. And again, I'm happy to say that Azure has really delivered in that aspect. NASDAQ Board Vantage is also a multi-tenanted platform. What that means is that for each of our 4,600 customers, or actually more than 4,600 customers, we are segregating them based on databases and file storages. And then on top of that, we are providing them an extra layer of security by encrypting each customer's data with their own key. Now, when we wanted to move to the cloud, it had to satisfy these primary requirements of our backbone architecture. And I'm happy to say again that moving to Azure, we found a one-to-one fit for pretty much everything that we had. So for example, when we were migrating our database, the Azure Database for MySQL Server was a perfect fit for our multi-tenant system. We could migrate everything one-to-one, and then on top of that, we got high availability, auto-scaling, auto-grow, and we didn't have to worry about managing our own infrastructure over there. Then when it came to customer security keys, we were using HSMs in the data center. Moving to the cloud, Azure offers AKV, which is doing exactly the same thing, but again, now we don't have to worry about high availability and everything that comes with maintaining the hardware. And then for file storages, the Azure Blob Storage was a perfect fit as well, because now we could, in the Blob Store, store each customer's data based on their own storage accounts. But I would say the greatest benefit that we get by being on the cloud is our engineers can focus on writing and delivering business value without having to worry about maintaining our own infrastructures. I don't have to get into those late night calls anymore to worry about, oh, we need to patch this server or a hardware module fail. Sometimes I still get called into those calls, but those are usually because of the bugs I've introduced into the system. But I would say now with the Azure AI Foundry, we have access to all the AI services as well, which has really helped to drive our innovation forward and help us stay relevant in this ever-changing technological landscape. I'm not going to bore you by explaining each part of this document. This is just to explain the gravity of our infrastructure. You can see we have many moving parts and components, from Azure Kubernetes Services to multiple databases, event-driven architecture, now AI Foundry, blob storage, and obviously we operate in a highly available environment. So each of these regions have a primary and a secondary, and all of these are replicated across all the regions that we operate in. So you can see it's quite an extensive architecture that Microsoft Azure is helping us to maintain. Right, let's pivot. As soon as we had moved to the cloud, I think this was sometime in mid-2022, later that year, we all know ChatGPT came and it changed the way that we are going to be engineering permanently, in my opinion. Now, NASDAQ, being the transformative company that it is, recognized the transformative potential of this technology, and we got to work. But then again, we didn't want to just go to market with the first feature that we could, just for the sake of being the first one. So NASDAQ poured a lot of energy, time, resources, and a few dollars to analyze what would make the most sense for our customers. Our product people, our business, they spoke to our customers, identified the business flows that would make the most sense, and this is where we decided that smart document summarization and the AI meeting minutes would be the best strategic advantage for our customers. And they've been living in production for quite some time. The next step that we wanted to focus on was driving customer adoption. I'm happy to say that out of more than 4,500 customers worldwide, more than 1,000 have enabled AI on their platforms already. And you might be thinking that's less than 30%. You guys need to do better. But let me explain. We operate in a very sensitive segment of the market. Our customers trust us with some of their most strategic, sensitive data that is used to drive business decisions. When AI was becoming mainstream, there was a lot of challenges that we had to go through. We not only had to solve those challenges, but we also had to build that confidence and pass it down to our customers. So that's exactly where Azure and PostgreSQL has been helping us. But before I go there, I'd like to talk about some of those challenges that we've faced and we have solved. AI is non-deterministic. Now, as engineers, we have worked with non-determinism before. We have dealt with large distributed systems where certain risk conditions do not execute in the order that you expect them to. But they are usually edge cases, and they can be mitigated with a significant amount of effort. AI is inherently non-deterministic. That's just how it is. We have to accept that, work with that, and work around that. I don't need to impress upon anybody how bad hallucinations can be. But in our line of work, where customers are, again, using data to drive decisions, hallucination can be catastrophic for both us and our customers. So that's also something we have to understand and work with. Now, the medium that we use to communicate with AI today is natural language and prompt engineering. And we know that natural language is ambiguous. Again, as tech people, we work with programming languages. Programming languages are built to remove ambiguity. Unless it's JavaScript, then it's just ambiguity. But I digress. The point I'm trying to make is that natural language is inherently weak when it comes to removing ambiguity, also something we have to understand and work with. Now, AI has come a long way since 2022, but it is still slow and expensive to deploy at scale. And organizations like NASDAQ with products like Board Vantage, which are trying to mainstream that, we have to be aware of that and work with the limitations that we have. Obviously, AI also introduces a new way of, a new challenge of testing and validating the outputs. Again, as programmers, we are used to determinism in our unit tests, but you can't do a assert equals on a response from your AI output. So we either have to build new tools or work with tools that somebody else is building to validate and test AI in this changing paradigm. Well, I think that's enough for the theory. Now I'd like to talk about some of the AI features and show you some demos. Now, since 2022, we have put a few features in the hands of our customers. The ones that I'd like to talk about are meeting minutes and the board assistant. The meeting minutes is a AI feature that has we deployed it in March earlier this year. I do want to impress upon everyone that a board meeting minute is very different from the meeting minutes that you would see from a regular meeting. These are legal doc records, which can be used in court proceedings. These contain important information about deliberations, how decisions were made, or anything, and basically strategic word exchange. Corporate secretaries, after the meeting has happened, spend a lot of time trying to formulate these meeting minutes to ascertain their accuracy. In fact, I was on a call with one of the corporate secretaries a couple of weeks ago doing a demo for this feature, and she told me they spend more than 2 weeks to finalize these meeting minutes. Our tool can do it in less than 5 minutes. But before we go any further, I'd like to show you guys how this tool actually works. So I'll switch over to a demo. So there's a few ingredients that goes into to building these meeting minutes. You have an agenda document. I will upload that. An agenda document, as the name indicates, will basically outline whatever is going to happen in the meeting and who's going to talk about that. It's also going to mention any participants in the meeting, whether they are joining online or they are joining in person. Then you have a meeting material. This is basically your board packet. And these can be massive documents, up to 400 to 600 pages. Sometimes I've seen even more. Meeting notes basically is the note taker in the room. They will record any word exchanges that happen, voting decisions, all of those things that are not obviously in the board packet. And then we allow you to upload an example of the previous meeting minutes, because we understand that each company has its own way of formulating their meeting minutes document. We don't want to assume that you want it in a certain way. We let you upload an example, and then we use AI to apply that style and formatting into your linguistic formatting, basically, into the actual document. So I'm going to go ahead and attach an example as well, and then we'll press generate. Obviously, we're not going to wait for this because it can take a while, and we don't have a while. So I have previously generated a document that I'd like to show you guys, and you can see that this is a meeting minutes from a Massachusetts Port Authority meeting, and we're not going to go through the whole thing, but you can see how the AI formulated the entire document. Let me just make it a bit bigger. And it will, based on the agenda that you've uploaded, is going to add all the information. And then in the end, if there's any key decisions, it will add those as well. And then basically it's formatted according to the example of the meeting minutes that was provided. Right, so let's talk about what happened here. I uploaded a few documents, some magic happened, and then you had a draft of the meeting minutes generated. Let's try to unravel that magic. As I uploaded the agenda, we used document intelligence, and I'm going to talk about document intelligence and the importance of that in just a second. We extracted all the information from the agenda, and then we applied an agenda processing prompt. Obviously, this is a special prompt that parses the agenda in a way that we're going to use it further. We process that with 4.1 mini, and then we store that in the memory for the processing. As a next step, we then extract meeting materials, and this is where document intelligence becomes really important because, as I mentioned, these can be documents of up to 400 to 600 pages. When we did not have document intelligence, we wrote our own semantic chunker. The idea was that you want to create small chunks of these documents, create embeddings, and then store them into the database. That chunker was doing quite well, but it was always a guessing game where a section starts, where a section ends, and sometimes it would not be very accurate. When we started using document intelligence, basically what it does is it gives you a well-defined layout of the entire document. So you know where's the heading, you know where a section starts, a section ends, and it's particularly very good when it comes to recognizing figures and other diagrams because sometimes a lot of context is missed in those things. So once we've done that, we still perform the chunking, but now it's easier to chunk this document. And then we create embeddings with the text embedding ADA and persist that into the PostgreSQL. We will be talking a lot more about the PostgreSQL with PG Vector enabled in just 1 second. The exact same thing happens with the meeting notes, where we process that with document intelligence, semantically chunk it, create embeddings, store it into the PostgreSQL database. And then obviously, if you have an example of the document, we will process that with the document intelligence, and we will apply a style guide prompt to it, and we will keep that on the site as well. Now that we have processed all the ingredients of this massive board context, it's time to start putting it together. So how do we put it together? We take this processed agenda, and then we match each of the headings to the stored embeddings. And you can see that with PostgreSQL, with PG Vector enabled, it is so easy to run a hybrid search. What you can see down here is a Java code snippet with a SQL query that has a vector similarity search as well. You don't need to, there's no rocket science here. It's just simple SQL with hybrid search. And then you can do a lookup based on the cosine similarity. And then you can limit up to the number of embeddings that you are looking for. The exact same thing happens now that we've matched the embeddings. We can apply the prompt because remember, what we've selected right now is basically chunks of text, right? So when you apply now we need to process it with natural language so it makes sense to the reader. So we apply the prompt, process that with the chat completions, and now you have the agenda that has been enriched with the meeting material. And now the exact same thing happens with the meeting notes. Same process, refine it, and then add that to the enriched draft that you had with the meeting material. And now if you have a styled example, optional, but if you want it, we are going to apply that style, apply the prompt, process that with chat completions, and you have a final drafted meeting minutes. I must impress upon each of you that this tool is not built to replace the corporate secretary. It's built to make their lives easier. So instead of spending 2 weeks on drafting this manually, now they spend less than 5 minutes, and they can be more productive with their time. And then obviously you want to have the human in the loop. That's why you get a Word document downloaded. the corporate secretary can go back and edit that if she wants or he wants to add more information to it, or if anything doesn't make sense, they could change that as well. Now, with AI meeting minutes, we proved that we could use a PG vector enabled in Postgres Azure Database, which is natively available. You all can go and do that right now. We proved that it works for production workloads, and it was working really well for us for all our customers. So then the next natural step was, okay, how do we use it in our next feature, which is the board assistant. Now, the board assistant is infinitely more complicated than the meeting minutes, and it will be fun demoing it to you guys. But the idea with the board assistant is that we want to make life easier for our users, particularly our directors. So if you are a director heading to a meeting, you're probably busy with a lot of things. What we want to do is provide you contextual insights into your upcoming meetings. So for example, it'll tell you what you should be preparing for based on whatever has happened in the last 2 to 3 meetings. And then it gives you a chat assistant that you can use to talk to and get more information. But let me show you how that works. I know I have to switch the screen. Just give me 1 second. All right, so imagine that I am a director. I come into my board portal. I have a meeting on the 28th of November, and then I can see an AI icon over here. I click on this guy, and then it shows me the different insights that I should be preparing for my upcoming meeting. So for example, strategy, risk, finance. So let's go ahead and click on risk. It has selected the top 6 insights for risk that I should be focusing on in my next upcoming meeting. So let's say I go ahead and choose cybersecurity, because why not? It's Ignite. So what it's going to do is going to give me a comparative analysis of what we have talked about in the previous meetings, and what should we be focusing on the upcoming meeting, right? So, for example, I'm not really happy with what it has told me. I could start talking to it and say, could you expand on Q3? And just like that, it's going to go and look up all the information stored in the back. Process that with AI and give me what I should be focusing on. You can also see that it gives you follow-up prompts. So based on the conversation you're having, it will tell you what other questions you should be asking. So you can ask that question as well. Then on top of that, if you want to know something else about the meeting, for example, let's say who else is attending. Could you tell me who else is attending? So it's going to give me information about who else is attending. So if I want to avoid somebody, I will not go to this meeting. And then obviously you can switch to the other insights, and you can do the exact same process over there as well. So let's switch back and see what has happened. Now, as I said, our board assistant is much more complicated. What's happening here is we are just building this new feature, but we have had customers who've been adding data to our platform for the last 8 to 10 years, and this is a lot of data, right? So if you have a board packet, as I mentioned, these could be like 400 to 600 pages, and then multiply that by the amount of board meetings that you're having. It's a ton of data that needs to be processed. So what we did is we built the board assistant in 2 parts. One is your data processing pipeline. So as the customer enables AI, you're going to go and look up this data, process that with a pipeline. We'll just get to that in a second, and then store that into the vector database and also the MySQL for non-vector information. And then the board assistant part is basically the interface that lets you interact with the assistant, as you just saw in the demo. For the data processing pipeline, we decided to go with a serverless approach. The reason for that is because, as I said, we are processing an immense amount of data. I don't want to worry about CPU, memory limits, or anything like that. I will get what I need to get to process this, and I only pay for what I have to pay for. And if I'm not using it, I'm not going to pay for it. And then I don't want to put stress on our existing infrastructure by processing all this ton of data with the existing microservices. It's not meant for that kind of workloads. And then, so what we're doing is we are using a fan-in, fan-out approach. There's an orchestrator that fires up per client. I'm not going to bore you with all the activities that happen over here, but then for each of the meetings, it processes each of the steps that are in part of your meeting as activity functions. Let's take a look at what happens in one activity function. So what happens is, let's say I'm processing the metadata, so any information about the title, where the meeting is happening, any other tags that might be important, I take them, I chunk them, I create the embeddings. We tag the embeddings so that we can find them later in an easier way, and then we persist them into the vectorized database. The insights generation that you saw is a pre-processed activity. We have a research agent that runs in the background that's going to pick up all your documents. It's going to run a comparative analysis. It's going to refine that, and it's going to run a comparative analysis again. And it does that over many passes until it's reached the state where now you can say, okay, I have a very good comparative analysis of how a trend in my insights has changed over the last 3 to 4 meetings. And then obviously this is not a vector, it's basically text, so we will persist that into the MySQL database. So you guys saw me interacting with the assistant. What happens is I write a prompt, it gets converted into an embedding, we match that with the existing context, and then basically it fetches all the existing data. The reason why I put this piece of snippet over here is this is .NET Core. This is again to demonstrate how easy it is to write a hybrid search query in any platform, basically. So all this is doing is employing EF Core, link, and simple vector search. And now you can basically limit this with cosine similarity in any of the semantic rankings that you want to do as well. So once we found the matching embeddings, we will add the historical context so the AI knows the flow of information and the context that the chat was being held in. We will then apply the prompt because obviously this is a board assistant. We don't want you asking about the weather or anything like that. We will then process that with a chat completions model. And then we are using the Azure service for Signal R to basically stream this back to the client. This is another view of how the chat assistant works. You write a query, the orchestrator kicks in, is going to go look up all the information that it needs from the vector database, combine that with the historical context, and then pass it to the LLM to process it, and then the response is streamed back to the user. If we look at the architecture, it does look quite daunting, but it's actually basic Azure services. We are using Azure Kubernetes Services. This is where we pull all the information from the into the Functions app, and then the board assistant microservice basically is the one that is doing all the chat work. Then we are using Azure Messaging, which is basically we are using Service Bus to drive our event-driven architecture. Signal R is used to stream data back to the client. We are using PostgreSQL and MySQL to persist data, as you just saw. And then we are using durable functions so that we can keep track of what is happening. And then if an activity fails, we can re-trigger that activity. And then obviously Azure, the AI Foundry is the backbone of our entire AI infrastructure. We are using multiple models. We are using the 4.1 for chat completions. We are using the O3 Mini for reasoning. And then we are using the text ADA embedding 002 model. And then obviously document intelligence, as I explained earlier, is used heavily to process all these documents. In the beginning, when I was talking about enabling AI, I mentioned some of the challenges that we are facing, especially related to determinism and hallucinations and all of those things. I do want to talk about how Azure AI Foundry has helped us to solve those. I don't know if you've used the prompt flow, but I've found it extremely helpful to break down complex problems into smaller steps. You can write a prompt, you can add context, you can write more prompt, you can add more context. So it helps you tackle determinism. Now, I am by no means saying that it's going to remove non-determinism. That's probably never going to happen, but it helps you tackle it and helps you engineer your systems in a way that can be a bit more predictable. Document intelligence, as I explained, it has really changed the way that we provide context to the AI. Our context is much richer. It gives us much more accurate responses. Model deployment helps us to deploy any models that we find relevant into our data zone deployments. As I mentioned earlier, our requirement is that we will deploy the model wherever our customer is based. And then obviously we can configure our consumption plans as well. Now, as prompt flow has helped us in to tackle complex problems. Chat Playground helps us tackle less complex problems. But if you're looking for, oh my God, what's the output going to be if I write a small prompt and this is my context, you can easily get the response there without writing a whole program that communicates with OpenAI using the APIs. So it makes your life really, really easy. And I use that actually all the time. Then with Postgres and pgvector, as I mentioned earlier, this was really a game changer for us when it came to vector databases because we are using Postgres today already. And Azure supports natively enabling pgvector. So we enabled that. It really drove our innovation because we could quickly start building POCs and then start building production workloads as well. Since it's already part of our infrastructure, we have it in high availability, cross-region replication, and everything that we have today, we don't have to worry about the maintainability and all of those things that come with, again, maintaining your infrastructure. pgvector, again, game changer, as I mentioned. With meeting minutes, we are storing data in a temporary way. So it's all, once the flow is completed, we delete all the embeddings. With chat, in this case, we didn't have to worry about indexing because it's, you save it once, you look it up, and you delete it. With Board Assistant, it is much more complicated because now you're adding millions of embeddings per customer. So the H and SW indexing really comes in handy over here. And then combined with the SQL search that we do, it really makes the queries perform much, much better. I think you would be thinking, wow, this is cool, but show me the code. Unfortunately, I won't be able to show you the code, but I will be able to show you the next best thing. I'd like to show you a slide or a dashboard from how our AI systems perform in production today. And how these help us to basically build confidence in our customers. What we're doing is we are using deep eval to evaluate our AI responses over many publicly available government documents. So for summarization flows and AI meeting minutes, we take publicly available documents, we churn them through our systems, and we have thousands of different data samples that we then process. And I'd like to show you guys in terms of different metrics. For coherence, correctness, you can see how well these systems are performing. We check for bias, we check for toxicity, and then for answer relevancy, you can run it per document. We can do document cosine similarity score comparison, and then obviously you can do a simple cosine similarity score comparison over multiple models. So we can switch the model, we can run the whole thing again, and it basically will give you the will give you the results, and then you can compare them to other models that are performing. Right, I would like to take this opportunity to, at the end, thank Microsoft very much for inviting us here and having us share our experiences with you. I think this partnership that we've had has really helped to drive our AI innovation forward. I've been working with Charles and Bart over here over the last 1 year, and they have been extremely helpful. So, this was a great experience for me to come here, show you guys how our tools, we've built our AI tools. And if you have any questions, I'll obviously be outside in the expert area. Would love to hear from you guys. And I would say thank you very much for your attention, and hope to see you guys again.